A wanderer with no home and a father, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
My job was a little less stressful than yours.
Oh yeah, I finally got a job. I'm the king of Atlantis. But that isn't. I'm gonna kill Aquaman and burn his kiss.
Stop.
Will help us. You look rough.
Good job, brother. High five. Good luck. I cannot believe you let this happen. We need to find Manther.
Black Trident. During King Atlan's Titan was a curse upon them all.
Writing.
Bloodline.
You can't win a world without hope.
You're not as bad at this as you think. If you lead, the seven kingdoms will follow.
What happens when Aquaman is forced to team up with his greatest enemy to save both Atlantis and the entire world? Packed with epic underwater battles, powerful villains, and shocking twists, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom 2023 takes the adventure to a whole new level. Welcome to KaKo Film, where we bring you exciting movie reviews, hidden facts, and everything you need to know about your favorite films. Aquaman and the Lost 23 American superhero film based on the DC Comics character Aquaman. The movie is directed by James Wan and written by David Leslie Johnson, Mika Goldrick. It is the sequel to Aquaman 2018 and serves as the 15th and final movie in the DC Extended Universe, DCEU. Jason Momoa returns as Arthur Curry, also known as Aquaman. In this new adventure, Arthur is forced to team up with his former enemy and half brother Orm to stop the dangerous Black Manta from destroying his family and threatening the entire world. Black Manta gains the power of the cursed Black Trident, which allows him to unleash deadly forces while searching for the mysterious lost seventh kingdom of the seas. The film also stars Patrick Wilson as Orm, Yahya Abdul Mateen as Black Manta, Amber Heard, Randall Park, Dolph Lundgren, Tamara Morrison, Martin Short, and Nicole Kidman in important supporting roles. The idea for an Aquaman sequel actually came from Aquaman sequel during the production of the first movie. He shared his own story ideas with director James Wan, hoping to continue Arthur Curry's journey. Although the first Aquaman became a huge worldwide success, James Wan did not want to rush into making a sequel. Instead, he wanted enough time to create a bigger and better story. In January 2019, James Wan officially agreed to oversee the development of the sequel. 1 month later, David Leslie Johnson Michael Goldrick returned to write the screenplay. In August 2020, James Wan was officially confirmed to return as the film's director. One explained that the sequel would explore more of Atlantis and the underwater world while introducing new kingdoms, creatures, and mysteries. He also wanted the story to touch on environmental issues such as climate change. However, as production continued, the movie evolved into more of an action adventure with a strong buddy comedy style, focusing on the unlikely partnership between Aquaman and Orm. The film also takes inspiration from classic science fiction adventures and old fantasy films, giving it a colorful and adventurous feel. The official title, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, was announced in June 2021. Filming began later that same month and continued until January 2022. Production took place in several locations, including the United Kingdom, Hawaii, Los Angeles, New Jersey, and New Zealand. Because the filmmakers wanted to improve certain parts of the story, several rounds of additional filming and reshoots were completed between July 2022 and June 2023. During these changes, some characters received smaller roles than originally planned. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom had its special fan premiere in Los Angeles on December 19, 2023. It was officially released in theaters across the United States on December 22nd, 2023. After its release, the movie received mostly negative reviews from critics. While many viewers praised the impressive visual effects, exciting underwater action scenes, and the entertaining chemistry between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson, others felt that the story, pacing, and villain were weaker than those of the first film. Despite the mixed response, the movie earned around $440 million worldwide at the box office. Although this was a respectable amount, it was considered disappointing because the film had a very large production budget of around 205 to 115 million, along with significant marketing costs. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom also marked the end of the DC Extended Universe, ma- making it the final film in that shared superhero franchise before DC Studios moved forward with a completely new cinematic universe. 4 years after becoming the king of Atlantis, Arthur Curry is now happily married to Mira, and together they have a young son named Arthur Jr. Arthur tries to balance his responsibilities as both the ruler of Atlantis and a family man living between the underwater kingdom and the surface world. Although he enjoys spending time with his family, the pressure of leading an entire kingdom often makes life difficult. Meanwhile, David Kane, also known as Black Manta, is still obsessed with taking revenge on Arthur for the death of his father. Working alongside marine biologist Dr. Stephen Shin, Black Manta searches the oceans for powerful Atlantean artifacts that could help him become strong enough to defeat Aquaman once and for all. Their search leads them to a hidden cavern deep beneath the ice in Antarctica. Inside, Black Manta discovers the mysterious Black Trident. As soon as he touches the ancient weapon, an evil spirit trapped inside the trident begins speaking to him. The spirit promises to give Black Manta incredible power if he helps destroy Aquaman and Atlantis. Without realizing the danger, Black Manta becomes possessed by the cursed weapon. 5 months later, Black Manta attacks an Atlantean storage facility and steals a rare mineral called orichalcum. He needs the mineral to power ancient Atlantean machines that even modern Atlanteans do not fully understand. During the attack, Arthur, Mera, and the Atlantean army try to stop him. A fierce battle breaks out, and Mera is seriously injured while Black Manta manages to escape with the Orichalcum. Arthur soon learns that Orichalcum is extremely dangerous. When used as an energy source, it releases massive amounts of greenhouse gases that increase global temperatures, damage the oceans, and create extreme weather across the planet. Long ago, ancient Atlantean kingdom nearly destroyed the entire world by using this same powerful substance. Determined to stop Black Manta, Arthur realizes he needs help. The only person who knows enough about Atlantis' hidden secrets is his imprisoned half brother, Orm. Although Orm was once Arthur's greatest enemy, Arthur secretly breaks him out of prison and asks for his help. Reluctantly, Orm agrees to join him. Their search takes them to the sunken citadel, a dangerous pirate city hidden beneath the sea. There they meet the criminal leader known as Kingfish, who provides information about Black Manta's secret location. Following the clues, Arthur and Orm travel to a volcanic island in the South Pacific. The island has been badly affected by orichalcum, causing many plants and animals to mutate into dangerous creatures. After fighting Black Manta's forces, Orm accidentally touches the Black Trident. The weapon shows him powerful visions from the past. Orm learns that the Black Trident was created by Kordax, the brother of King Atlan and the former ruler of the lost kingdom of Necros. Kordax once tried to steal the throne of Atlantis but was defeated and imprisoned using powerful blood magic. The only way for Kordax to escape is by using the blood of one of King Atlan's descendants. Arthur and Orm quickly realize that the Black Manta has kidnapped Arthur Jr. because the child's royal blood can free Kordax. With the help of Dr. Stephen Shin, the Atlanteans discover that the lost kingdom of Necros, where Kordax is imprisoned, is hidden beneath Antarctica. Arthur, Mera, Orm, and the Atlanteans travel to Necros for the final battle. Arthur fights Black Manta but is nearly defeated. Just in time, Mera arrives and saves him. As she escapes with Arthur Jr., Black Manta throws the Black Trident at her. Orm catches the weapon before it can strike her. The spirit of Kordax immediately leaves Black Manta and possesses Orm instead. Under Kordax's control, Orm attacks Arthur. During the fight, Arthur's blood is spilled, breaking the magical seal that has kept Kordax imprisoned for centuries. Kordax is finally released. Arthur refuses to give up on his brother. Instead of fighting him with hatred, he reminds Orm that they are family and convinces him to reject Kordax's influence. Orm regains control of himself and joins Arthur in destroying both Kordax and the cursed Black Trident. With the Black Trident destroyed, Kordax's magic disappears and the lost kingdom of Necrus begins collapsing. Arthur tries to save Black Manta, but Black Manta refuses his help and chooses to fall into a deep crack beneath the collapsing kingdom. Arthur, Mera, Orm, Dr. Shin, and the Atlanteans safely escape before Necrus is completely destroyed. Everyone recognizes that Orm has redeemed himself by helping save Atlantis and the world. To allow Orm to start a new life, Arthur and Mera decide to tell Atlantis that Orm died during the battle. On the condition that he never returns to Atlantis, Orm secretly leaves to live on the surface world. After everything that happened, later it was rewritten. Arthur realizes that the surface world and Atlantis must work together instead of remaining separated. Believing that unity is the only way to protect the oceans and the future of the planet, Arthur publicly reveals the existence of Atlantis during a speech at the United Nations. He announces his plan for Atlantis to become an official member of the international community, marking the beginning of a new era of peace between the people of the sea and the people of the surface. Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry, Aquaman. The returning hero Jason Momoa returns in his central role as Arthur Curry, the half Atlantean, half human superhero known as Aquaman. By the time of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Momoa's portrayal it was rewritten had been established across 5 years and multiple appearances within the DC extended universe. His return for the sequel represented a continuation of the character's arc but with significant evolution in circumstances. In this film, Arthur Curry has transitioned from a reluctant ruler establishing his authority to a matured king balancing his responsibilities as both the sovereign of Atlantis and a new father to his infant son. Arthur Jr. Momoa's physicality and charismatic screen presence remain central to the character's appeal. His chiseled physique, rugged charm, and capacity to balance humor with dramatic vulnerability made him well suited to portray a superhero grappling with the complexities of parenthood and royal obligation. The new costume design for the sequel shifted Arthur's traditional orange and green suit to a dark blue and silver outfit, reflecting the more serious tone and the character's evolution into a leader bearing greater responsibility. Patrick Wilson as Orm Maria's Ocean Master. The reluctant ally Patrick Wilson reprises his role as Orm Marios, Aquaman's half brother and former king of Atlantis. In the first film, Orm served as the primary antagonist, but Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom transforms his function within the narrative. Now imprisoned due to his previous actions against Atlantis, Orm transitions from nemesis to reluctant ally as Arthur must recruit his help to confront a more dangerous threat. Later, it was rewritten. This transformation required Wilson to bring nuance to a character who remains morally ambiguous while becoming essential to the plot's progression. Wilson's portrayal captures the complexity of familial antagonism combined with a recognition of shared threat. The dynamic between Momoa's Arthur and Wilson's Orm represents one of the film's central emotional cores, exploring themes of brotherhood, redemption, and the possibility of alliance across historical enmity. Wilson's established credibility as a dramatic actor grounds the character's internal conflict and makes his character arc from isolated prisoner to crucial partner dramatically compelling. Yahya Abdul Mateen II as Black Manta. The escalated threat Yahya Abdul Mateen II returns as David Kane, also known as Black Manta, Aquaman's primary antagonist, who has been significantly elevated in both power and motivation. Having failed to defeat Aquaman in their first encounter, Black Manta remains driven by his need to avenge his father's death. In the sequel, he becomes exponentially more formidable through possession of the mythical Black Trident, which unleashes an ancient and malevolent force that fundamentally transforms him from a skilled pirate and mercenary into a superhuman threat capable of threatening not just Aquaman but all of Atlantis. Abdul Mateen the Sukun's portrayal emphasizes Black Manta's transformation from a character primarily defined by personal vendetta to one who becomes a nearly apocalyptic force. The actor brings intensity and commitment to depicting a villain who has evolved beyond simple mercenary motivations into someone driven by cosmic level power and mythological significance. Director James Wan had long planned for Black Manta to occupy a more central and expanded role in this sequel, and Abdul Mateen II's performance as the escalated threat anchors the film's central conflict. Amber Heard as Mira. The reduced but essential Queen Amber Heard returns as Mera, Arthur's wife and Queen of Atlantis, though her role in the sequel was significantly reduced compared to the first film. By the time of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Mera has evolved from Aquaman's love interest and ally to his equal partner, now serving as the mother of their heir to the throne. Despite the reduced screen time, Herd's presence remains symbolically and narratively important as she represents the human element of Arthur's life and the personal stakes he fights to protect. The decision to reduce Herd's role was attributed by director James Wan to the narrative structure itself rather than external factors. Wan explained that the plan was always for Mera to have less prominence in the sequel as other characters. Particularly, the expansion of the Black Manta storyline required greater focus and development. Heard's portrayal maintains the character's grace and her aquatic abilities while providing the emotional anchor that reminds Arthur of what he fights for beyond political responsibility. Nicole Kidman as Atlanta. The warrior queen Nicole Kidman returns as Atlanta, Arthur's mother and a fierce leader with the heart of a warrior. Having established her character in the first film, with established her character sacrifice despite eventual sacrifice, Kidman's return was significant for providing maternal grounding to Arthur's character. Atlanta represents the bridge between Arthur's dual heritage and serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made to protect both Atlantis and the surface world. Kidman's presence in the ensemble brings substantial acting credibility and dramatic weight to the supporting cast. Her portrayal of Atlanta emphasizes the warrior aspects of the character, drawing upon her established filmography and capacity to embody powerful female characters. The character's return provides thematic resonance regarding sacrifice and the costs of heroism across generations. Patrick Wilson and Ensemble. The villainy framework, the ensemble of actors in the core supporting the core narrative functions to establish the interconnected world of Atlantean politics and the various threats that emerge throughout the story. Dolph Lundgren reprises his role as King Nereus of Sebel, Mera's father, and a political leader navigating the complexities of Atlantean diplomacy. Lundgren's physical presence and distinctive voice contribute to establishing Nereus as a formidable figure whose authority and motivations shape external political dynamics affecting Arthur's rule. Randall Park returns as Dr. Stephen Shin, a character whose scientific research into Atlantean civilization provides external perspective on the hidden kingdom. Park's portrayal of the marine biologist character maintains the bridge between the surface world and Atlantis, providing exposition and grounding the fantastical elements in elements of scientific inquiry and discovery. Temuera Morrison reprises his role as Tom Curry, Arthur's human father. Morrison's character Morrison's character represents the moral center and human perspective that connects Arthur to his surface world heritage. The character's presence reminds viewers of Arthur's dual nature and provides thematic grounding regarding what it means to protect family across species and cultural boundaries, supporting and new characters. Expanding the universe, new characters introduced in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom expand the universe and provide fresh narrative possibilities. Pilu Asbeck was cast in a significant but initially undisclosed role, later revealed to be Cordax, adding new dimensions to Atlantean mythology and political intrigue. Vincent Regan appears as King Atlan, a historical figure connected to the legendary Black Trident and mythological history. His character provides context for the ancient origins of Atlantean power structures. India Moore was cast as Carson, a new character representing previously unexplored elements of Atlantean civilization. Moore's inclusion in the ensemble brought contemporary representation to the underwater kingdom. Jani Zhao was cast as Stingray, another new character expanding the roster of individuals involved in the underwater adventures. These new cast members help broaden the narrative scope and introduce fresh story possibilities beyond the established character relationships. Martin Short provided the voice of Kingfish, adding comedic voice acting talent to the film. His voice performance contributes to the film's tonal balance, providing moments of levity amid the dramatic action sequences. John Rhys Davies provided the voice of the Brine King, adding another layer to the underwater kingdom's established political hierarchy through voice performance. Casting strategy and continuity. The casting strategy for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom reflected a commitment to maintaining continuity with the first film while introducing strategic new talent to expand narrative possibilities. Director James Wan's consistent involvement as both director and producer ensured thematic and tonal continuity between the two films. The screenplay by David Leslie Johnson, Mick Goldrick drew upon story concepts by Van Johnson, Mick Goldrick, Jason Momoa, and Thomas Sibert, demonstrating collaborative development among key creative personnel. The ensemble was positioned to balance returning characters who provided narrative continuity with new characters offering fresh storytelling opportunities. The primary cast of Momoa, Wilson, Abdul Mateen Tutu, and Hurd maintained the core relationship dynamics, while the expanded supporting cast created space for exploring new political complications and previously unexplored aspects of Atlantean civilization. Thematic significance of the casting ensemble serves specific thematic purposes within the narrative. Arthur must balance his roles as king, father, and protector, roles that inherently conflict as the film progresses. Wilson's arm represents the possibility of a redemption and alliance across historical antagonism, thematically exploring whether former enemies can cooperate against greater threats. Abdul Matin's Black Manta embodies the idea that villagy villains can evolve beyond previous characterization to become cosmic level threats. Here's Mera, despite reduced screen time, represents what Arthur ultimately fights to protect his family and the future of his civilization. Kidman's Atlanta provides generational perspective, reminding viewers that sacrifice and struggle are cyclical themes affecting multiple generations. The supporting cast collectively creates the political and social world that contextualizes the central conflict. Production context and casting challenges. The film was produced by Peter Safran, James Wan, and Rob Cowan for Warner Brothers Pictures, with cinematography by Don Burgess, who returned from the first film to maintain visual continuity. The production budget of 205 to 215 million reflected substantial investment in casting major talent and creating the visual spectacle expected from a DC superhero sequel. The casting the casting represented efforts to balance established star power with emerging talent, maintaining audience familiarity while introducing fresh perspectives. The ensemble casting was completed under the context of the DC Extended Universe's final chapter, as James Gunn and Peter Safran prepared to reboot the DC universe with new visions. This knowledge of finality potentially influenced casting decisions, with the ensemble functioning as a farewell to the DCEU timeline rather than an opening chapter of an ongoing saga. The film was released on December 22nd, 2023, positioning it as a major holiday season release with significant commercial expectations. Casting as legacy, the casting of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom ultimately represents a legacy statement for the first DC Extended Universe iteration. Momoa's Arthur Curry evolved from reluctant hero to established king across the film's timeline. A character arc reflected in the casting's consistency and the character's matured presence in the sequel. The ensemble's collective presence of the DCEU universe before its reinvention, serving both as conclusion to established narratives and potential jumping off points should characters receive future development outside the main scene DCEU timeline. Production development, Momoa's pitch and the sequel's origins, the development of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom began not in a studio boardroom, but in the imagination of its star. During the production of Aquaman 2018, star Jason Momoa developed a story pitch for a sequel that he gave to Warner Bros. Pictures Group chairman Toby Emmerich and producer Peter Safran. In October 2018, before the film's release, Momoa said he would be more involved in the development of a potential sequel and expected filming to begin in 2019. Momoa's proactive engagement with the franchise's future, developing art treatment before the first film had even reached theaters, reflected both his personal investment in the character and his ambition to shape the story rather than simply inhabit it. Momoa and his producing partner Brian Mendoza wrote a 50-page treatment for the sequel, which Warner Brothers bought but did not entirely follow, and the actor was paid $15 million for his involvement. The 50-page treatment was a substantial creative document that demonstrated Momoa's seriousness about out his role as a storytelling partner rather than merely a performer for hire. The studio's decision to purchase the treatment while not following it entirely reflects the standard creative tension of franchise filmmaking. The actor's vision informing but not dictating the final product. Director, script, and director James Wan said several storylines could spin out from Aquaman, with that film introducing seven underwater kingdoms that had yet to be fully explored. Emmerich had enough confidence in box office projections for the film by early December to begin discussing a sequel. By the end of January 2019, when Aquaman was set to become the highest grossing film based on a single DC Comics character, Warner Brothers was in negotiations with Wan to oversee the development and writing of a sequel with the potential to return as director. Wan had been very protective of sequels to his previous films, Insidious 2010 and The Conjuring 2013, and was deeply invested in the world building of Aquaman. The screenwriter's return was confirmed shortly after. Active development on a sequel was getting underway with the first film's co-writer and frequent one collaborator David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick signing on to write the screenplay. At the end of February, Warner Brothers scheduled Aquaman 2 for release on December 16, 2022. Safran explained that he and One did not want to rush a sequel, and Warner Brothers had been supportive of that, which is why the film's release was scheduled for 4 years after the first film. He added that they were approaching the Aquaman franchise similarly to the Conjuring universe, with spin offs like the Trench exploring stories about the underwater kingdoms alongside the mothership films featuring Aquaman. Safran said one knew the architecture, the armory, the military, the look, the feel, and the general vibe of each of the seven kingdoms and wanted to explore them all in future projects. Creative vision. Buddy Comedy Meets Climate Change 1 was confirmed to be directing the sequel at the virtual GC Fandom event in August, when Wilson was also confirmed to return. One said it would be more serious than the first film and feature themes that were more relevant to the real world, such as climate change. He said the creatives were not afraid to address this on a big scale through the film, noting that the Aquaman character is environmentally conscious in the comics and fights to keep the ocean clean. He also affirmed that the film would remain a fun action fantasy movie. The tension between these two stated ambitions, climate change, thematic seriousness, and fun action fantasy entertainment, would define the creative challenge of the production throughout its development. Momoa said a scene was featured in the film in which Aquaman addresses the United Nations on climate change, with the actor having previously done so at the UN's Ocean Conference. Beneath the environmental themes, the film's actual structural identity evolved significantly during development. Safran compared this relationship to that of Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy's characters in the film 4080s, 1982. While one said the film written Prince said the film was written as a bromance action adventure story, so focus on that relationship with the two brothers overcoming their differences to save the world. Com- Compared to the first film, which focused on Aquaman's relationship with Mera, Johnson McGoldrick stated in March 2020 that the sequel would not be based on a specific comic book, but was taking inspiration from the Aquaman stories of the Silver Age of comic books that featured Black Manta as the villain. The Silver Age influence was more than a source of plot material, it determined the film's entire aesthetic register. In August 2021, one said the sequel was strongly influenced by the film Planet of the Vampires, 1965, as well as old school Euro horror and the stop motion monsters created by animator Ray Harryhausen. He said the film had a very retro look similar to the horror films of the 1960s and featured unsettling mechanical creatures with an old school sci fi and horror feel. Pre production, world building, and the design of the Lost Kingdom of Necros became one of the production's most ambitious creative undertakings. One said it was fun designing the Lost Kingdom of Necros, detailing it as a society with various vehicles and weapons, such as the individually operated machines called the Octobots that move in and out of water which arm encounters. The kingdom's retro futuristic design was inspired by the art depictions in the Silver Age Aquaman comics from the 1950s and 60s, but with a modern spin. One felt that Antarctica and its landscape were familiar, yet largely unvisited by much of the world, which allowed him to explore a heightened version of it in The Lost Kingdom. For The Lost Kingdom, better, it was rewritten. The creatives incorporated ancient Atlantean technology more advanced than typical human technology into Black Manta's cruise uniforms and weapons, his colossal submarine, and the Octobots. Black Manta's design was given substantial attention. One said Black Manta's suit, which forgoes the all black power suit from the first film for design that was remade in all silver and more accurate to the comics version, as well as his ship and technology, were inspired by the aesthetic of the Silver Age Aquaman comics and Ivan Rice's The New 52 comics. The Amber Heard controversy, no aspect of the production generated a more sustained public attention. The controversy surrounding Amber Heard's continued involvement in the franchise. Amber Heard debunked rumors in November 2020 that she would not be reprising her role as Mera from the first film following allegations of domestic abuse made against her by her ex husband Johnny Depp. That month, a petition to have Heard fired from the franchise received more than 1.5 million signatures. Safran said they never considered making the film without Heard and would not react to the pure fan pressure of the petition and other social media conversations. However, Heard later stated, during a second defamation trial in depth, we heard that they didn't want to include her in the film and that she had to fight to keep her part. She claimed that revisions were made to the script that reduced her role to a very pared down version, including removing action sequences for her character. DC Films president Walter Hamada testified during Depp and Heard's defamation trial that the studio considered recasting Mera, but only because of concerns about Heard's lack of chemistry with Momoa, not the abuse allegations. He added that it was the studio's philosophy to hold people to their options and not to renegotiate contracts, and said the size of Heard's role had not changed during the sequel's development. Amada explained that the film was always intended to be a buddy comedy that focused on the relationship between Aquaman and Om. Tatiana Siegel at Variety reported that Heard had been nearly fired from the sequel after the first film's release due to the chemistry concerns, but these plans were abandoned after her ex boyfriend Elon Musk intervened. Heard described her experience with Momoa and Wan on the film set as hostile, which was refuted by a DC spokesperson who called the production positive and collaborative. Hard ultimately appeared for around 20 minutes in the film with two of her scenes, a fight sequence with Black Manta and a love scene with Momoa, reportedly cut during production. Several commentators noted upon the film's release that many of Heard's scenes had been removed and that the remaining scenes appeared to be clunky and awkward. Actor Dolph Lundgren, who portrays Mera's father Nereus, later said that he and Heard had larger roles in the original cut and script before they were reduced during reshoots, filming principal photography. UK, Hawaii, and Los Angeles principal photography began on June 28, 2021, using 5 stages and the backlot at Warner Bros. Studios Leavesden in Watford, England, alongside an external water tank. Filming used the working title Necros. Many of the crew members returned from the first film, including Don Burgess as the cinematographer and Bill Brzezinski as production designer. The special effects and visual effects crew invented new technology and VFX rigs for the underwater scenes in the film, so it would be easier for the actors to shoot their scenes with 100 cameras capturing the performances and action scenes, which was then applied to 3D versions of the actors. This new setup was devised after one found the rigging system used for the first film to be complex and because its equipment caused physical pain for the actors. One believed the new setup was more versatile and safe. The technological innovation was a central story of the production process. to create the various underwater worlds and creatures. One and the creatives transitioned away from the blue screen method used on the first film and instead used the new eyeline studio technology, which saw the actors in circular booths surrounded by 136 cameras, which producer Rob Cowan said changed the creative and practical methods of shooting the film. Location work expanded across multiple countries and landscapes. Location shooting took place in early September 2021 at the Saunton Sands Beach in Devon, as well as at Piccadilly in the city of Westminster, London, and in Jersey City, New Jersey that year. After shooting 95% of the film in the United Kingdom, production moved to Hawaii for on location shooting until December 9. Filming then moved to Los Angeles and officially wrapped on January 12, 2022, in Malibu. Filming was completed on time and under budget, and reportedly needed around a week of reshoots, post production test screenings, reshoot, and the Batman problem, the post production of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, became one of the most protracted and troubled in recent DCEU history, extending over nearly 2 years and involving multiple rounds of reshoots that fundamentally altered the film's content and structure. Warner Brothers adjusted its release schedule in March 2022 due to the COVID 19 pandemic's impact on visual effects vendors' workloads. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was moved to March 17, 2023. One said that while he preferred the Christmas release timeframe for the film, he was thankful for this delay because it allowed for more time to work on the visual effects and its new technology, which he called groundbreaking, and said the film would not have made its prior release date. The corporate restructuring at Warner Brothers added additional layers of complexity. In April 2022, Discovery Inc. and Warner Media merged to become Warner Brothers Discovery WBD, led by President and CEO David Zaslav. The new company was expected to restructure DC Entertainment, and Zaslav began searching for an equivalent to Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige to lead the new subsidiary. The film received several test screenings in the middle of 2022, which yielded mixed results, prompting a new cut. Two rounds of reshoots then took place between that point and the start of 2023, with Warner Brothers film chairs Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdi involved in editing the film. The Batman casting confusion became one of the more surreal chapters in the film's troubled post production. Momoa revealed in July 2022 that Ben Affleck was reprising his DCEU role of Bruce Wayne Batman for reshoots on the Warner Bros. Studios backlot in Burbank, California. Aaron Couch of The Hollywood Reporter reported soon after that Michael Keaton had filmed a scene as his version of Bruce Wayne Batman from director Tim Burton's Batman 1989 and Batman Returns 1992. The scene reportedly confused audiences during test screenings, and Couch felt this was why Affleck joined the reshoots. In August, Warner Brothers delayed the film to December 25, 2023 to help spread out the marketing and the distribution costs for its feature films. The film would be delayed again to December 22, its final release date, having been pushed back 3 times from its original December 2022 slot. The extended reshoot process introduced further complications. Multiple rounds of additional filming between July 2022 and June 2023 altered the storyline, reduced the roles of certain actors, including Hurd and Lundgren, and attempted to resolve the narrative confusion that test audiences had identified. The involvement of Warner Brothers film chairs, DeLuca and Abdi in editing decisions reflected the studio's increasing intervention in a production that had become one of its most troubled creative properties. The visual effects work on Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was handled by multiple vendors and represented one of the largest VFX undertakings in the DCEU's history. The underwater sequences, which one had described as requiring groundbreaking new technology, demanded extensive post-production work to realize the expanded Atlantis, the lost kingdom of Necros. The script and later it was rewritten, and the film's various creatures and combat sequences. One said the critics wanted the sequel to provide a more immersive and exciting experience for audiences while expanding the story and characters, and explained that the depiction of Atlantis in the film was expanded upon from the first film by providing the city depths, residential areas, and an area inspired by Times Square, while also exploring some of its politics. Atlantis was also given more color and vibrancy. The Eyeline Studio technology, the 1:13:36 camera system that replaced the blue screen methodology of the first film, was central to the production's approach to creating believable underwater environments. This system captured performances from multiple angles simultaneously. Later, it was rewritten, creating 3D data that could be integrated more naturally into the digital environments than traditional blue screen compositing allowed. Music Rupert Gregson Williams and the score Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom original motion picture soundtrack is the soundtrack album to the DCEU film of the same name, composed and arranged by Rupert Gregson Williams. The soundtrack was released by Water Tower Music on December 22nd, 2023, to coincide with the film's release. Gregson Williams returned from the first film to score the sequel, bringing continuity to the franchise's musical identity. His approach to the sequel score maintained the thematic material he had established in the original while expanding it to accommodate the new characters and environments that the sequel introduced. The Lost Kingdom of Necros, the bromance dynamic between Arthur and Orm, and the escalated threat of Black Manta all required new thematic material that needed to coexist with the established musical language of the franchise. Rupert Gregson Williams's score is happy to just replay or remix all the themes from before, and they're strong enough for that to work. This observation from reviewers captured the score's approach, leveraging the strength of the established themes from the first film while adapting them to the sequel's different emotional contexts. The 52-minute 17 track album gave listeners a comprehensive document of the sequel's musical landscape. A single deep end was released on November 17, 2023, preceding the film's theatrical debut by approximately 5 weeks. This advanced single release gave audiences an early taste of the film's musical identity and functioned as part of the broader marketing campaign building toward the December opening. The score's challenge was substantial. The film's tonal shifts between the buddy comedy of the Arthur Rom dynamic, the environmental seriousness of the climate change themes, the horror adjacent elements of the necrus sequences, and the emotional weight of the family drama all demanded musical treatment that could navigate between these registers without losing coherence. Gregson Williams' approach was to use the established themes as an anchor while deploying different orchestral textures and instrumental colors for each of the film's distinct tonal environments. Released theatrical release Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom premiered at a fan event at the Grove, Los Angeles on December 19th, 2023, and was released in the United States on December 20th. The fan event premiere at the Grove, a commercial shopping and entertainment complex in Los Angeles rather than the traditional premiere venue like the TKL Chinese Theater or the Dolphy Theater, was a notably modest premiere setting for what was ostensibly a major tentpole release. The choice of venue reflected both the film's complicated relationship with conventional premiere culture and the diminished expectations that had gathered around it following the extended reshoot process and the DCEU's troubled 2023 theatrical performances. The December 22 release date, 2 days before Christmas Eve, was strategically positioned for the holiday movie going window that had historically been one of the most reliable periods for family friendly blockbuster attendance. The first Aquaman had been released on this December 21, 2018, and had used the holiday period to build its enormous worldwide gross across several weeks. The sequel was positioned to replicate this strategy. Though the competitive landscape was significantly different, Wonka, the Timothée Chalamet vehicle, was already established as the holiday season's dominant family film by the time Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom reached theaters. The film was the 15th and final film in the DC Extended Universe, DCEU. Later, it was rewritten. This film institutional context, seen as the closure of an entire shared cinematic universe, gave its release a melancholy quality that extended beyond its individual qualities. The DCEU, which had begun with Man of Steel in 2013 and had aspired to rival Marvel's interconnected universe model, was ending not with a planned culmination but with a sequel to one of its more successful entries. Released amid an industry wide superhero fatigue and the imminent arrival of James Gunn's rebooted DC Universe, home media, the home video release included a feature length commentary by One, deleted scenes, and behind the scenes featurettes. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is coming to 4K UHD, Blu ray, and DVD on March 12th. The March 2024 physical media release, approximately 3 months after the theatrical opening, gave the film a second commercial window during a period when the theatrical run had effectively concluded. The home media release's deleted scenes were of particular interest given the extensive reshoot and re editing process the film had undergone. The material that was cut, including Heard's excised action sequence and love scene, the Keaton Batman footage, and whatever additional character material had been removed during the multiple reshoot rounds, represented a significantly different version of the film than the one audiences had seen in theaters. The feature length commentary by One offered the director an opportunity to address the production's creative decisions, though the degree to which he could discuss the institutional pressures that had shaped the final cut was necessarily limited. Reception box office performance. The commercial performance of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was a decisive disappointment that confirmed the DCU's terminal decline and validated the industry's growing concern about superhero fatigue. The film grossed $440 million two real dollars worldwide against touching budget of 25 a production billion dollars. Wasimar does $215 billion, the disappointing opening dollars, earning the 81 billion domestically and $80. 1 million globally compared to the original Aquaman's needs $72 million domestic opening. The domestic opening of $28. 1 million represented a catastrophic 61% decline from the first film's $72 million debut, a drop that immediately signaled the sequel's inability to recapture its predecessor's audience. The global opening of approximately $80 million was equally discouraging relative to the first film's worldwide debut. The $205 million budgeted tentpole caps of 2023, a terrible year for superhero movies, as the fourth consecutive flop for Warner Brothers and DC Studios following The Flash, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and Blue Beetle. In its sophomore outing, collecting a soft $19. 5 million over the weekend and an estimated $26 million through New Year's Day on Monday. It has grossed $84 million domestically and $258 million globally after 2 weeks of release, on par with eventual comic book disappointments like The Flash, The Marvels, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. The sequel outperformed other DCEU films released in 2023 but fell short of its predecessor. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has now earned $433 million from theaters from all over the world. James Wan's second adventure in the world of Atlantis has earned $309.8 million dollars from international markets, with the remaining $123.2 million dollars from its global total coming from domestic theaters. The final worldwide gross of $440.2 million, dollars, while not insubstantial in absolute terms, was devastating relative to the film's economics. Against a production budget of 205 to 215 millions, plus marketing costs that likely added another 100 as 150 million, the film needed significantly more than its theatrical gross to approach profitability. The comparison to the first Aquaman's $1. 148 billion worldwide, a decline of more than 60%, underscored the magnitude of the franchise's commercial collapse. Audiences instead chose to ring in 2024 with Wonka, which reclaimed the top spot on domestic box office charts with $23.9 million dollars over the weekend. The fantasy musical has continued to impress at the box office with $142 million domestically and $386 dollars. 9 million worldwide to date. Was the loss of the holiday box office crown to Wonka, a film with less than half the production budget, was the most symbolically significant commercial failure of the film's theatrical run, demonstrating that audiences had found an alternative to superhero spectacle for their holiday entertainment and had embraced it enthusiastically. The international performance, while proportionally stronger than the domestic showing, could not compensate for the overall decline. The first Aquaman had earned approximately $813 million dollars internationally. The sequel's $310 million dollars represented a decline of approximately 62%, almost precisely matching the domestic contraction. The consistency of the decline across both the domestic and international markets suggested a systemic audience rejection of the franchise's continuation rather than a localized market failure. The film's performance within the context of 2023's broader superhero landscape was equally telling. All four DCEU releases in 2023: Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom underperformed commercially, collectively confirming that the DCEU brand had exhausted its audience appeal. Marvel's own 2023 releases experienced similar commercial challenges, suggesting that the issue was not specific to DC but reflected a broader audience reassessment of the superhero genre's value proposition. Critical response aggregate scores and the critical reception to Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was the most negative of any film in the franchise and among the most negative of any DCEU release. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has been met with unfavorable reviews, currently holding a rotten 36% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom debuted with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 36%, declared to be rotten by the review aggregator website. However, the audience score has now been revealed with filmgoers adding their own reviews, and it's very different compared to the low tomatometer rating. Currently, the Aquaman sequel has an audience score of 77%, suggesting that viewers are enjoying the film for the most part. The gap between the 36% critic score and the 77% audience score reflected a pattern that had become increasingly common in franchise filmmaking. Professional critics Professional critics judging the film against standards of narrative coherence and artistic ambition, while general audiences assessed it primarily as entertainment spectacle. The 77% audience score, while substantially higher than the critical score, was nonetheless lower than the first film's audience rating, suggesting that even the audience most sympathetic to the film's appeal found the sequel less satisfying than its predecessor. Developed the script is Critics praised the performances and chemistry of Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson, but argue that the DC universe fails to focus on relatable human stories rather than just powerful superheroes. This recurring critical observation that the buddy comedy between Momoa and Wilson was the film's genuine strength undermined by a plot and production context that failed to support it, captured the essential tragedy of the production. The creative instinct to build the film around the Arthur Rom romance was sound. The execution of that instinct within the constraints of DCEU franchise machinery, extensive reshoots, and external controversy produced a film that could not fully realize its own best idea. Selected critical reviews, the critical discourse around the film crystallized around several recurring themes. The Momoa Wilson chemistry as the film's sole reliable pleasure, the visual effects quality relative to their cost, the impact of the production's troubled history on the finished product, and the question of whether the DCU deserved a more dignified ending. One review captured the consensus disappointment. This should have been an outstanding sequel to 2018's Aquaman, but instead you get something akin to a video game adaptation. This director has so much more potential, but the gazillions in budget were just squandered on VFX as if this was a half hearted Netflix production. But worse is that the writing is just horrid. One reviewer noted James Wan's direction retains everything that stood out last time with a few warners and one amazing horror moment, and yet he still frustratingly reined in here rather than given increased creative freedom. The observation that one was reined in rather than given increased creative freedom was among the more perceptive critical assessments. Pointing to the institutional constraints, the studio's reshoot interventions, the test screening responses, the narrative confusions introduced by the Batman casting changes that had prevented the director from fully realizing his own vision for the film. Another reviewer observed. Also, in a rare feat, considering the current state of comic book cinema, the CG is better here than in the original. When on a 1-1 comparison with Aquaman, though, the Lost Kingdom looks more believable, helped massively by the lighting. This assessment of the visual effects as actually superior to the first films, even as the critical consensus found the overall film inferior, points to the specific nature of the sequel's failures. The production's technical capabilities yet genuinely improved. Its ability to marshal those capabilities in service of a coherent narrative and tonal vision had not. The DCEU's final chapter, the film's critical and commercial failure, carried significance beyond its own merits or deficiencies. It represented the final assessment of an entire cinematic universe's trajectory. And so it seems the DC extended universe will go out with a tiny splash rather than a bang as Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom lands in theaters floating face first in the water following a wildly underwhelming opening weekend. This reception marks the end of the current franchise iteration with even star Momoa admitting it may well be Arthur Curry's last stand, ahead of DC's 2025 reboot with James Gunn's Superman Legacy. The acknowledgement from the franchise's own star that this was likely the character's final appearance in this continuity gave the film's reception an additional layer of finality that intensified the sense of a franchise ending under unfavorable conditions. The DCEU as a whole, 15 films released over a decade, ranging from critical and commercial triumphs, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, to disastrous failures. Justice League's troubled theatrical release, The Flash's controversy plagued rollout, concluded with a film that embodied many of the universe's chronic problems executive interference, tonal inconsistency, production troubled by external controversy, and the inability to build sustainable creative momentum across multiple entries. That these problems persisted into the franchise's final chapter. Despite the success of the first Aquaman having demonstrated what the DCEU was capable of when its creative elements aligned, was the most damning verdict on the institutional management that had characterized the universe's final years. The first Aquaman's $1. 148 billion worldwide gross had been the DCEU's highest achievement for a solo character film. proof that the right combination of director, star, visual imagination, and entertainment energy could produce a genuinely global phenomenon. The sequel's $440 million, barely a third of its predecessors' total, demonstrated how completely that commercial alchemy could dissipate when the production circumstances were wrong. Between the two films lay a distance that measured not just commercial decline but in commercial institutional exhaustion. The end of a shared universe that had never quite figured out what it wanted to be, finding its final expression in a sequel that had been rewritten, reshot, and rescheduled into a condition that satisfied neither its creators nor its audience. The film's legacy is therefore inseparable from its context. As a standalone entertainment, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom contains genuine pleasures. The Momoa Wilson chemistry, the imaginative design of Necros, individual action sequences of genuine spectacle, and one's distinctive visual sensibility in moments where the institutional constraints temporarily release their grip. As the final chapter of the GCEU, it represents the culmination of a decade of missed opportunities, creative conflicts, and institutional failures that prevented one of entertainment's most valuable intellectual properties from achieving its potential. The DC universe that James Gunn and Peter Safran would subsequently launch with Superman T25 was built in part on the ashes of the franchise that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom brought to its quiet, commercially disappointing close. In Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, directed by James Wan and written by David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, Jason Momoa reprises his role as Arthur Curry, diving back into the deep and turbulent waters of superhero cinema. With an ensemble cast including Amber Heard, Patrick Wilson, Yahya Abdul Martin II, Randall Park, Nicole Kidman, and Temuera Morrison, the film navigates through a series of high stakes conflicts, both personal and global. However, it's not just the seas that are stormy. The film itself walks a messy path of narrative and visual execution. Arthur, aka Aquaman's latest adventure, kicks off with him recounting a daring hostage rescue to his son Arthur Jr., followed by a montage of his life post first film. As king of Atlantis and then Queen Mera's hard husband, he navigates royal duties and family life, discovering his son's unique ability to communicate with fish. Meanwhile, his nemesis, David Hyde, Mateen 2, aka Manta, obsessively repairs his Manta ray suit, seeking vengeance for his father's death. Hyde collaborates with Dr. Stephen Shin Park, an Atlantis fanatic, who accidentally uncovers the mysterious kingdom of Necris, a lost kingdom of Atlantis. Here, Manta acquires the Black Necris scepter, which transforms him into a monstrous thing bent on locating Oracle, a substance capable of destructive climate change. As Manta's forces storm Atlantis, injuring Mera, Aquaman must enlist his imprisoned brother Orms Wilson, aid to stop Manta's plans and protect their world. One of the film's unexpected highlights is the dynamic between Wilson and Momoa. Their on screen interactions, filled with playful banter and apparent camaraderie, bring a surprising romantic chemistry overshadowing Momoa's scenes with Heard. It's in these moments where the two men share the screen that the film finds its true rhythm and charm. Another highlight is the film's attempt to weave a narrative where unity is the key to salvation, a poignant message undoubtedly close to Momoa's own environmental advocacy, which is a commendable feat. That's where the journey through these underwater realms ends. While the first Aquaman film maintained a balance of seriousness and fantasy, The Lost Kingdom veers into cartoonish territory. This tonal shift was so obvious the audience in my screening couldn't stop laughing, especially at the moments the audience is supposed to take seriously. This is only enhanced by the faulty technical aspects of the film, particularly the CGI. The most glaring issue is with Momoa's Aquaman suit. It seems ill fitting, and his head appears unnaturally pasted onto the costume. These visual inconsistencies are jarring, especially for a film with a high 3D ticket price. In contrast to Zack Snyder's portrayal, Aquaman here seems to have lost a bit of his might. The character is frequently bested in battles, almost as if the film hesitates to showcase his full potential. This underwhelming portrayal left me longing for the more formidable hero seen in earlier renditions. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom struggles with inconsistent character portrayal, subpar CGI, and a lack of narrative direction. A crucial aspect of any franchise is its ability to make the audience invested in what's next. There is none of the care put forth here. This universe is over. Why should anyone care? Ultimately, it's a film that has its moments, but ultimately struggles to find its footing in the expansive ocean that is the superhero genre. What is that we hear from deep within the digital ocean? Is it the protracted bubbling whinge of superheroes in their death agonies? Are we witnessing a Götterdämmerung of the superhero movie as a bunch of B to A-listers dressed sheepishly in their tattered spandex crouch on the green screen soundstage, furtively making calls to their agents between takes and wondering if they shouldn't have held out against superhero films like Julia Roberts and Leonardo DiCaprio? I have often enjoyed superhero films with all their surrealism, melodrama, and comedy, and I actually like The Marvels with Brie Larson, but there is no doubt about it. Where the first Aquaman movie was in enough trouble, with Jason Momoa smirking his way through the story of Aquaman's undersea travels as if guesting on a laggarade. Now we have a terrible sequel, again directed by James Wan, reportedly the final film in the DC Extended Universe. The Aquaman franchise is just flatlining, floating rewritten, floating through the dreary depths like the kind of discarded plastic bag which is going to choke the last remaining Vaquita porpoise. Once again, Jason Momoa is back with his blandly self admiring Aquaman in the supposedly comedy light mode borrowed from Taiga Waititi's Thor films, the alpha superhero with a cheerfully laid back home life. Aquaman is always hanging out with his dad, Tom Temuera Morrison, drinking conspicuously branded cans of beer from the fridge. Aquaman is now in charge of Atlantis and he has imprisoned his wicked half brother Orm, the guy whose awful plans for amphibious domination created such non drama in the previous film. It's a role which Patrick Wilson reprises with an air of icily affronted dignity, which is only partly intentional. The script, and later it was rewritten, the Queen of Atlantis, played by Amber Heard, actor whose steadfastness in standing up male bullies has to be respected, and Dolph Lundgren is once again Aquaman's father-in-law, Nereus. William Dafoe, who kept his self-respect in the last film playing Aquaman's mentor Vulko, doesn't appear, but Nicole Kidman shows up again, taking the DC shilling as Aquaman's willowy and distraught mother Atlanta. The deal this time around is that Aquaman has become a dad of all the adorable things. There are loads of shots of Momoa with a real baby, changing nappies and getting weed in the face by the cherishable little tyke. The trope of the tough guy spotting the baby papoose is very often used as a tired relatability shortcut by Hollywood. So it proves again here. Now Aquaman has to face the second banana villain from the previous film, here upgraded to premier banana status. This is Black Manta, played by Yaya Abdul Mateen II, who has among his entourage a bullied marine biologist called Dr. Shin, a role in which the gifted comic actor Randall Park is entirely wasted. Will this titanic confrontation involve a rapprochement between Aquaman and his troubled semi sibling, or who knows? Or more to the point, cares? At the end of 124 long minutes, both film and audience are deeply immersed in something, but it isn't seawater. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was released on 21 December in the UK, the 22nd December in the US, and the 26th December in Australia. Ironically, the tagline for James Wan's sequel to his 1.1 billion grossing Aquaman 2018 is "The Tide is Turning." That's an understatement for the comic book movie genre right now, which is struggling to appeal to an audience suffocating from its box office dominance. And it's doubly true of the DC Extended Universe, DCEU. Dusty, which comes to an ignoble end with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom after decades spent mostly chasing the tail of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. It's commonly said that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom hereafter Aquaman 2 struggled because we know this corner of Warner Brothers is being retired. So none of it matters now. I'm not convinced that's true, as I know people who are unaware the DCEU is ending or that it was even a thing, but they've simply chosen to avoid seeing a movie that feels like it's not offering anything new and exciting. Aquaman 2 finds Arthur Curry, Jason Momoa, now the ruler of Atlantis, married to Mera Amber Heard, and dividing his time between dull royal duties and raising their newborn baby son. Meanwhile, David Kane, Yaya Abdul Mateen Tugu, aka Black Manta, is still looking to avenge his father's death at the hands of Aquaman and stumbles upon a powerful black trident that endows him with superhuman strength granted by its dormant owner, Kordax, ruler of the titular lost kingdom of Necros. Kane swiftly brainwashed into releasing high quantities of greenhouse gas orichalcum as part of his plan to usurp Aquaman's throne. And so Arthur must join forces with his bad brother Orm, Patrick Wilson. By breaking him out of his prison to defeat this new menace, this film plays rather like Thor Ragnarok 2017 in how it's even more weighted towards the lightweight and comedic vibe that was present before in moderation. The midway development of Arthur and Orme teaming up also evokes the Thor and Loki dynamic in Marvel. So much so the characters evoke the name Loki at one point as the similarities are so stark. And to be fair, the movie is at its best whenever Patrick Wilson's around because he's often the only actor who seems to grasp the tone and is genuinely trying his best in the role. Jason Momoa, in contrast, seems to have lost the gravitas he once had as Aquaman, seemingly taking inspiration from what Chris Hemsworth did as Fat Thor in Avengers Endgame 2019. It's initially fun to see Aquaman coping as a sleep deprived dad and looking a little out of shape. But then you wonder if Momoa decided the character is going to be closer to his real life persona than ever before, and he's not putting much effort in. Eyebrows are raised when Aquaman spends most of the film in a baggy shirt, as if to hide the fact Momoa wasn't as committed to training sessions down the gym this time around. There are also some unavoidable issues with Amber Heard not being as available to film because of her trial with ex husband Johnny Depp. So Mira's role is diminished, and many of her scenes appear to have been given to Timira Morrison's as Arthur's human dad Tom. It doesn't hurt the movie too much, but considering Mira was the co-lead of the first film, her frequent absences feels a bit strange. It also feels like a mistake to make a sequel with the same villains involved, only with Orme now helping his brother defeat Black Manta. Yahya Abdul Matin too still carries a lot of physical presence, but he's going through the motions and we are retreading old ground with his quest for vengeance. The Lost Kingdom angle is mildly interesting, but the new villain, Kodax, is reduced to being a green ghost half the time. So feels more like a surround style influence on events than a character we can truly engage with. And I'm still not entirely sure what his master plan was. Another problem is that the original Aquaman was at least visually stimulating because we'd never seen an underwater superhero movie on that scale before. Later, it was rewritten with all the challenges that present filmmakers in making it work and not look too silly. Its aesthetic and creature designs were phenomenal, but there isn't much in the sequel that comes close to matching it. We can be blown away by the look and feel of Atlantis a second time, so even the new Lost Kingdom and a few different creatures don't add enough freshness to the movie. It looks fine, and there's some imagination to its underwater Lord of the Rings vibe at times, but cumulatively, it doesn't leave a big impression. There's also nothing here on the same scale as the Aquaman climactic battle, and even Kordax is defeated in a surprisingly abrupt manner, long delayed. And later it was rewritten. It feels like Aquaman 2 just didn't come together now that director James Wan couldn't rely on the appeal of how the film looks and sounds. Plus, Momoa isn't as invested in the part. Now the DCEU is being swept aside as it's perhaps little more than a contractual obligation. God bless Patrick Wilson, a regular in Wan's films, for giving it his best, as he makes the middle act more bearable. But when your sparring partner is a visibly checked out Momoa, he's facing a losing battle. It's kind of funny that the last scene mirrors a development in Black Panther 2018, and the final moment from Aquaman directly references Iron Man 2008. And it's as if the writers are acknowledging the DCEU was always in the shadow of what Marvel is doing, and only a small number of their movies unequivocally worked. Wonder Woman, Shazam, The Suicide Squad. We are due a clean break and reset with James Gunn's Superman legacy in a few years, launching the rebranded DCU. But I don't know if asking audiences to invest in yet another cinematic universe is going to work. It feels like these types of movies will always be popular to an extent, but there's simply too much of it around. USA, UK, Canada, Australia, Iceland done 24 minutes. Color English director. James Wan writers David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick. Story by James Wan, David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, Jason Momoa, and Thomas Parr Siebert. Based on characters from DC starring Jason Momoa, Patrick Wilson, Amber Heard, Yaya Abdul, Martin Tu, Randall Park, Dolph Lundgren, Temuera Morrison, Martin Short, Voice, and Nicole Kidman. Developed the script and later it was rewritten. Is utilized pursuant to the Fair Use Doctrine under 17 USC Paragraph 107, United States, and the Fair Dealing exceptions under the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988. United Kingdom. This content is curated strictly for the purposes of transformative criticism, scholarly commentary, and educational review. It's been 5 years since James Wan's Aquaman became the highest grossing DC film of all time, surpassing $1 billion at the global box office. After taking a well earned hiatus by dipping his toes back into horror with the gnarly and twisted Malignant, one is now back with a massive sequel that is also serving as the final installment in the DC Extended Universe DCEU timeline. Since James Gunn and Peter Safran are already deep into rebooting the franchise as the new DCU, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom could very well be one's last DC movie. But at least he goes out with a bang because this sequel still has a lot to offer, even though Warner Brothers Discovery decided the upcoming franchise reboot after it was already shot. Writer David Leslie Johnson Miko Goldrick returns to pen the sequel screenplay with James Wan, Thomas Parr Sibbett, and main star Jason Momoa receiving story credit. Johnson Mick Goldrick can be seen as one of Wan's go-to collaborators at his Atomic Monster production house, as he's written multiple Conjuring films as well. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom kicks off in the freezing depths of Antarctica, where David Kane, Yahya Abdul Mateen too, and his team discover the power of the mythic Black Trident. Kane quickly sees this mysterious weapon as the key to making a comeback as Black Manta and getting revenge on Arthur Curry Momoa for his father's death, as seen in the first movie. Black Manta doesn't plan on stopping there, as he too seeks to destroy all of Atlantis and then plunge the entire world into a new global meltdown. However, this comes at a dangerous cost, as an unknown dark force emerges from the Black Trident's uncontrollable ancient power. When the Earth starts to feel the devastating effects of this extreme global warming, Aquaman is forced to forge an unlikely alliance with the only person who can lead him to Black Manta, his imprisoned brother Patrick Wilson. What ensues is a rollicking action adventure between the current and former king of Atlantis that not only has its fair share of laughs, but also a heartfelt conclusion to Aquaman's arc across the DCEU. Although it's a shame that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was unknowingly burdened with closing out the DCEU, writer director James Wan gets to have his final say with the titular hero at the end of the day. How one ties up Aquaman's journey is quite admirable. The sequel catches up with Arthur as both the new king of Atlantis and a new father right from the beginning. Much of the film is about Aquaman struggling to balance his royal duties with his life at home with Queen Mera Amber Heard and their infant son Arthur Jr. It's not until he works to heal his broken relationship with his brother Om that he's able to figure out what it truly means to have the responsibility of a superhero and how to use his position for good. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is admittedly nothing innovative or radical as a comic book film, but James Wan delivers even more of the colorful spectacle and epic scale that made 2018's Aquaman such a hit. It's a solid blockbuster that has the same amount of often dodgy VFX as the first film, paired with cinematographer Don Burgess's imaginative visuals. That being said, one delivers something a it's rewritten, a little more dark, similar to Sam Raimi's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Whereas the first movie only really had the trench sequence that showed off one's horror chops, there are now way more terrifying beasts and ocean enemies with visually inspired creature designs that Arthur must face. There is even an army of zombie like monsters brought to life with fantastic practical costumes and makeup. It all makes for a very entertaining blend of action, adventure, and horror. The sequel doubles down on the flashy action. The camera is always in motion and cuts for dramatic effect. Every shot makes an impression, and it would certainly be tough to sleep through something on this scale. Yet, it must be said that while the visual world building is impressive, it sometimes remains confusing due to the endless amounts of glossy CGI. The underwater sets lack realism compared to the many scenes on land, which was a problem also seen in the first film that sadly wasn't improved upon. Even if the underwater fight scenes do pack a heavy punch, Atlantis just doesn't feel very tangible at all. It's easy to imagine the poor VFX pulling audiences out of the movie in these instances. Jason Momoa does a stand up job as Aquaman once again, uh, delivering some of his best work as the character. The focus on Aquaman's human side makes his performance stand out more, although he doesn't go the whole film without whooping and screaming as he does best. This is all good fun, but when it goes on for too much, the humor starts to wear thin. Patrick Wilson's charisma makes a much welcomed return, playing the second biggest role in the movie alongside Yahya Abdul Mateen, whose lingering stares are enough to strike fear into the viewer. He is a genuinely scary villain in the times when he's not delivering fun banter during his numerous brawls with Aquaman. Randall Park returns as the marine biologist Dr. Stephen Shin, this time in a much bigger capacity than his cameo like role from the first movie. He provides fine comedic relief and a great up close perspective working under a malevolent force building toward the destruction of the planet. Amber Heard leaves a memorable mark as Mera despite getting less screen time, starring in some of the film's key battle scenes, as does Nicole Kidman's Atlanta. Willem Dafoe's Valko is sorely missed on the other hand. Dolph Lundgren's King Nereus somewhat takes over as Arthur's mentor, but can't fill up the entire gap left behind by Dafoe's absence. Meanwhile, Dwayne Description plays a Temuera Morrison plays a critical role in Aquaman's arc as his father Tom Curry. Their private father and son sit downs, wherein they both sip on beers and open up about their lives, help ground the stakes at hand. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom leans heavily into its climate change message. It's the film's main thread, but with a comic book style twist. The root cause of the climate catastrophe at hand is this ancient source of a fuel that was outlawed generations back after the Atlanteans realized the sheer amount of damage it could cause to Earth. Obviously, later it was rewritten, it is very self reflective, and it's easy for audiences to engage with the very real threat of climate change. But the plot never overcomplicates things. stating the destruction that it could cause very plainly and echoing its real life warnings. Some people will appreciate this, while others will see this as perhaps too forced or preachy for a blockbuster. However, it fits perfectly for a superhero like Aquaman. James Wan's bombastic Aquaman sequel marks the end of an era. As the final chapter for Jason Momoa's take on the iconic DC character, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom does a solid job of wrapping up his overarching story that spread across multiple movies. As the last entry in the DCEU, this sadly doesn't fully put a neat bow on the end of the franchise, yet, how could it when this wasn't in one's original plan? This is all about Aquaman, and no other major DC connections are mentioned. Even if this works as a standalone piece, it leaves an underwhelming feeling in fans that can only be blamed on the studio's management of the DC franchise. Nonetheless, coming after Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, and Blue Beetle, Aquaman, and The Lost Kingdom still stands as a well oiled blockbuster that delivers something unique when compared to other recent DC movies. The sequel's bombastic thrills, many good laughs, and heart can't be taken away, regardless of the upcoming franchise reboot. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom premieres in theaters on December 20 soon. On December 20 2023, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was released. It is a sequel to the 2018 release of Aquaman. A few days later, I walked into the theaters not knowing what to expect. While the first Aquaman was a good movie which I enjoyed, it was hard not to have doubts when thinking of other movies made by DC studios such as Justice League, Wonder Woman 1984, or Green Lantern. Seeking retribution for his father, Black Manta uses the legendary Black Trident to unleash an evil force that is both old and powerful after failing to destroy Aquaman the first time. In an attempt to put a stop to his anxiety, Aquaman teams up with his brother Orm, the former Atlantean ruler, in an unexpected partnership. They put aside their disagreements and work together to defend their family, their kingdom, and the world from impending catastrophe. When watching this movie, as the minutes passed, I could tell that this movie would be just as good as its predecessor. The underwater CGI was breathtaking. When seeing the sea creatures and the beautiful environment, the plot went well with the previous movie and really did well on expanding it. Just like any other movie, it did have some issues such as chemistry between love interests, but it still did a good job in general, in my opinion. The lack of chemistry between Amber Heard's character Mera and Jason Momoa's character Arthur, also known as Aquaman, is one issue I had with the film. Despite their best efforts, it is difficult to imagine them as the married couple, the king and queen of Atlantis, and the parents of a young child throughout the entire movie. As you continue watching, you find that there are several character relationships which have similar problems. There are numerous instances in the film where the bond between Arthur and his brother Om proved to be complex at first. For instance, they start to identify the source of their issues and engage in amusing banter. They discuss how Arthur's only goal in life was to put an end to the surface battle, not to become king. Orm confesses that in case Arthur came and grabbed it from him, he had been trained all his life. It's a significant brotherly moment that they kind of forget about later. Finally, they parted ways and went their own ways once more. There is no character development between them. So, while Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, like any film, has parts that could be better yet, additionally, parts that are great and done well. It is an action packed, visually gorgeous aquatic adventure that transports viewers to a fascinating underwater realm. From beginning to end, the visually stunning underwater scenery and amazing special effects combine to produce a truly cinematic spectacle. Additionally, the journey Arthur took become the ruler of Atlantis is evident to viewers. The whole cast gives outstanding performances that give the characters personality and dimension. The film expands the legacy of Atlantis and introduces new obstacles, all the while paying tribute to the DC universe. Fans of epic, visually stunning stories and superior stunning escapades should not miss this sequel. You've read the stories, you've debated the casting announcements, you've watched a handful of artists what to director tried to do justice to a legacy just short of a century old. Maybe you even demanded that Warner's release the Snyder cut. If so, thanks. By now, we don't need to recount to you the long storied history of the DCEU or remind you that because of a number of corporate decisions, scandals, disappointments, accusations, and outright WTF head scratchers, some new management is about to press the reset button on the comic book company's intellectual properties. Soon, we're all going to get a brand new DC dedicated universe. There's just one last bit of unfinished business to take care of first. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. A better title than Aquaman 2, not as truth in advertising upfront as Aquaman. Turn the lights off on the way out. Shouldn't have to shoulder the burden of dressing in the sins of its IP owning fathers. It wasn't like the DC. Extended Universe was the only big superhero movie game in town dealing with a constant stream of controversies, or for that matter, answer for the confusing Freudian world building, crossover obsessions, and later it was rewritten, and often dark revisionist doom scrolling that's characterized so much of this particular franchise. This sequel to the successful 2018 solo joint of one Arthur Curry, card carrying Justice League member and part-time King of Atlantis deserves to live or die by its own merits. Such parameters still aren't doing the movie any favors. Lost Kingdom does indeed feel like a standalone entry, one content to crack jokes at its own expense and splash around in its own shallow end of the intellectual property pool. It's also a tonal mess, dogged by VFX that range from video game cutscene to last minute rush job, complicated yet curiously thin storytelling, and endlessly aggressive rib nudging. Even the DC diehards might find this a bit too waterlogged for their tastes. Having taken on the task of leading the undersea world that is his birthright, that is his curry, Jason Momo indeed finding that heavy is the head that wears the crown. That is, when said crown isn't falling off the regent's aforementioned long haired noggin as he nods off during boring bureaucratic summits. He'd much rather be off kicking the crap out of pirates, hanging out with his brand new baby boy courtesy of his sweetheart Mera, Amber Heard, which, yeah, we know, or downing Guinnesses with his pops, Temuera Morrison. Despite the need to perpetually dodge streams of infant pee, however, life is good for the guy in the scaly green and gold suit. Domesticity suits him, even if sitting on the throne doesn't. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, a scientist named Dr. Stephen Shin, Randall Park, and a vengeful supervillain named David Kane, Yahya Abdul Mattoon Tutu, better known as Black Manta, have stumbled across a different underwater realm. Thawing icebergs in the Antarctic have revealed a lost kingdom, sea title that may hold the key to Kane issuing payback for losing his father during the latter standoff with Aquaman years ago. A glowing green trident reveals the secret history of this long dead civilization, which appeared to be populated by tentacled beasts, a king who based all of his fashion choices on this guy and the walking dead. It also tells Kane that a green glowing substance known as orichalcum is the source of their supernatural power, and if he can steal it from a secure location, unfathomable power will be his soon enough. The world begins experiencing unusually destructive weather, and Atlantis braces for all out war. The only way they can beat Black Manta and his forces is for Arthur to break Patrick Wilson out of the desert prison he's in. You all remember Orm, right? Aquaman's half brother and former king of Atlantis, also known as the Ocean Master, wanted to destroy the surface world and ended up becoming a pariah because of his abuse of power. Mom, Nicole Kidman, is jazzed about the idea of her boys teaming up. Curry's father in law, King Nereus, Dolph Lundgren, not so much. Once Arthur and an octopus trained in the art of espionage, no, really, liberate Orm from his captors. The duo travel to a remote volcanic island known as Devil's Deep, where they fight off some giant jungle creatures and eventually confront the even more megalomaniacal Black Manta, now blessed with eons old superhuman powers. Yada, yada, yada. It's around this time that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom adds buddy comedy to the list of subgenres it's dipping into. Along with message movie, there's a lot of climate change commentary here, some of it welcome and much of it heavy handed. Superhero epic written an action adventure blockbuster involving a wisecracking hermit crab for no apparent reason. It's probably not a coincidence that with his blonde hair and square chin, Wilson bears more than a passing resemblance to the comic book Aquaman that made his first appearance in 1941. And for longtime fans, the chance to see both the original recipe and extra crispy editions of the guy who talks to fish is likely to do make up for dealing with the blockbuster equivalent of Bilgewater everywhere else. As for Momoa, the star has always done well with Curry by threading a lot of his surfer bro persona into the character. But by the end of this sequel, there's the sensation of him bumping his head against the ceiling of his patented beachcomber charm that may have helped sell the first movie and lighten up some of the heavier elements that director James Wan threw into the mix. Well, that and an octopus playing drums. Here, it just feels like one more spice thrown into a flavorless seafood stew. You do have to give the Lost Kingdom credit for ending this sequel, and by extension, DC's attempt to outdo Marvel at their own interconnected universe. P game with what appears to be a direct nod and maybe a stealth fuck you to the MCU's Rosetta Stone. It's ballsy, if nothing else, which is more than you can say for most of this long, soggy goodbye, which works its eyesore of an underwater aesthetic, its well intentioned pro environmental preaching, and its whiplash ping ponging between dead serious and defiantly silly to death. Maybe this uneven experiment with fashioning an extended universe was always meant to go out not with a bang but with air bubble of a whimper. If so, mission accomplished. But even if you view this as just another superhero movie, it still feels like a little runt. We'd have been fine if this kingdom stayed lost. Thing that burns like coal in furnaces. Develop the scripted greenhouse gases. This creates greenhouse gases. The Antarctic ice sheet is rapidly collapsing, and Arthur's mother, Atlan Aquaman, and the Lost Kingdom is a treasure from the deep. Despite a few minor niggles, James Wan has delivered a fun popcorn adventure that sends the DC universe out with a bang. James Wan's original Aquaman is a tough act to follow. As an original 60s animated series fan, I was grinning like a Cheshire cat when the credits rolled. I emerged from the auditorium praising the director for delivering my Aquaman, the character I fell in love with as a child. So when the sequel was announced, I was elated. However, in the years that followed, the studio has been restructured multiple times. The stars have endured many controversies, and fans are even boycotting the movie as a result. But despite all the behind the scenes theater and cast stigma, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is finally swimming into cinemas today. But can James Wan stick the landing and send this chapter of the DCEU out with a bang? Or should Atlantis remain a sunken treasure? Fear not, DC fans, because Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is a treasure from the deep. James Wan has delivered a stellar follow up to his groundbreaking DC Bonanza and built upon the foundation cemented in 2018. The undersea visuals are stunning. The character development of some of its cast is gloriously played out, and the comic book roots of the characters are well preserved. That being said, the film isn't without its flaws. The plot of the opening hour is painfully thin. A few tired tropes emerge for another outing, and the storyline becomes a little formulaic after a while. But despite these minor niggles, James Wan has delivered a fun popcorn adventure that sends the DC universe out with a bang. The plot, for the most part, the plot does exactly what it says on the tin. Black Manta, still seething from his father's death, has sworn an oath of vengeance against Arthur Curry Aquaman. His quest has taken him to the depths of the oceans, endlessly seeking Atlantean technology to repair his destroyed suit of armor. And within minutes of the opening salvo, he stumbled on an ancient artifact lost to the depths for eons, the mythical Black Trident. This undersea weapon has been bestowed with dark magic tethered to the warmonger that forged it. And no sooner has Manta retrieved the weapon from the sediment than he is plagued with tantalizing visions promising him the power required to destroy his nemesis. All he needs to do in return is to free the tyrant from his incarceration, a prison forged within the polar ice caps. With the promise of unlimited power ringing in his ears, Manta sets off to release the fallen villain from his bondage. The only way to achieve this is to pollute the world's atmosphere enough to melt the ice caps and liberate the monster from within. This juicy plot point is a pertinent running critique of real life. With the world's atmosphere degrading by the day and climate change affecting our everyday lives, this social commentary has never been more poignant. Developed the script, and nor is it misplaced. Thankfully, it serves as a subtle undertone to the story and never feels like a mission statement from the creatives. But it does enough to leave the conversation fresh in our minds, and for that, applaud James Wan and his team. Arthur, Curry with Manta's search for pollutants ushering him ever closer to the Atlantean border, we are reunited with Arthur Curry. As the trailer suggests, Arthur is now a father and happily married to Mira, Amber Heard. The couple has divided their lives between the land and the sea, desperately trying to find the balance between their royal duties and their roles as parents. However, the mundane diplomatic and bureaucratic duties of the position have chipped away at Arthur's resolve, leaving him disillusioned. But after Black Manta's forces attack the undersea kingdom, Aquaman is drawn into a confrontation that brings vengeance to his front door. What follows is a race against time. On one side of the story, we follow Black Manta as he continues to pollute the atmosphere. On the other hand, Arthur must find a way to track Manta David Kane and stop him before the world is pushed beyond the point of no return. And the only person with any prior association with Manta is his imprisoned half brother Om. But can Arthur convince his former nemesis to help him track down Manta, or is the rift between them too great? Undersea treats cover more of the plot would do the film a major disservice. So I'll leave you to explore the film for yourself, but needless to say, the film is another visual treat. James Wan's first outing to Atlantis was packed full of visual splendor, and the sequel continues the trend with some truly jaw dropping images. The underwater kingdom is clean, crisp, and presented in gloriously vibrant, luminous colors. Despite the criticism, Wan and his team have maintained the underwater effects from the last film on the hair of every character to ensure continuity, and thankfully, it is far less jarring in this outing. Wan and his team have also increased the character development of the abundant sea life used in the film. Unlike the previous outing, here many of the creatures are given names and characters much in the same vein as the classic animated series. Optimizing this point is Aquaman's trusty seahorse Tom. Throughout the series, Arthur and his trusty steed have enjoyed the relationship of a master and a pet, and one has maintained that relationship here. There is something truly special for me as a fan to see Aquaman riding Storm into battle, and in the film, the duo look truly remarkable together. See, Lapod Maven, the noble octopus, gets a contemporary polish in this film, and one in particular serves as the perfect foil for Arthur. Well, the script and as rewritten, their exchanges are some of the most entertaining moments in the film and will have everyone tickled as they banter back and forth. How anyone could banter with an octopus is beyond me. But one has found a way to make it hilarious, and for this story, it works to a T. Teach cast, thankfully, the previous outing cemented the major players in place for the sequel, and every member of the cast delivered great performances here. Nicole Kidman, despite her limited screen time, is wonderful as Queen Atlanta. Dolph Lundgren turns in another solid performance as Nereus. Randall Park adds bundles of character depth to Dr. Stephen Shin and emerges as one of the true standouts. Temuera Morrison once again delivers a scene stealing performance and elevates the film whenever he is on the screen. To be fair, he enjoys more screen time than Kidman's Atlanta, but his comedic delivery here is the stuff of legend. And in truth, I could watch him sinking pints of ale and regaling us with words of wisdom for hours. Once again, Jason Momoa sinks his teeth into his new fun loving incarnation of Aquaman and looks to be reveling in his newfound freedom. Here, his enjoyment is tempered by the burden of responsibility, but the actor clearly loves this character and it shines through with this performance. That being said, during this outing, he fades into the background to let others emerge as the standout stars. It's not a detraction, but when the king of Atlantis is your lead, you'd expect him to carry you along on the journey. Om and Mentabut, make no mistake, this film belongs to Om and Black Manta. Yaya Abdul Mateen too is relishing his time as the main antagonist in this film, and it shows. Here, Manta is as foreboding as ever, ruthless, wrathful, and unflinching in his quest for revenge. The actor slips effortlessly into gear and presents us with a true DC villain, one that could give Lex Luthor a run for his money. It is wonderful to see Black Manta fully realized and bestowed with all the weapons, vehicles, and traits he is famous for. And by the time the credits roll, we will all be kicking ourselves that we never got to see more from him. A legion of villains headed by Luthor and Manta would have been exceptional. But sadly, we'll have to wait until the newly minted DC Studios has cemented itself before we can look forward to that possibility. And finally, Patrick Wilson is magnificent as Om. The former king of Atlantis enjoys a journey of self discovery in this film, and the result is a character we can root for. At times, we will despise him, at others, we will cheer for him. But in the end, every DC fan will love him. Orm's interactions with Arthur are the true jewels in the film's crown. And the exploration of brotherhood and family is a positive message that we can all learn from. The film was touted as a buddy comedy, and it certainly lives up to that mandate. But with Orm's bitterness permeating every exchange with his half brother, the comedic aspects are beautifully tempered. Bravo, Patrick Wilson. We needed more of this in the DC Universe. Positives rounding out the plus column is another wonderful score from Rupert Gregson Williams. His score from the last outing is refreshed with all the bells and whistles the composer could muster. The result is fantastic. Arthur's heroic theme is refreshed and presented anew. Manta's theme feels darker and more twisted than ever, and the score delivers where it counts. And lastly, kudos to James Wan for a few well placed Easter eggs in this film. I won't be pointing them out to you, but listen closely to the last time you see Black Manta submersible. Fans of Steven Spielberg will be grinning from ear to ear. Trust me. Overall, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is an absolute blast. One that sends the current DC universe out to pasture with its head held high. The film isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it delivers everything a DC movie should: a wonderful villain, a positive message, an uplifting finale, and an experience that whisks you away to another world. And that is what Sinners made for. Sure, the film isn't the massive climax we were all expecting. Not every climax is end game level. But The Lost Kingdom does exactly what a solid standalone adventure should. It delivers a fun time at the movies. So book your ticket for the biggest screen you can find. Strap yourselves in and prepare to venture into the gloriously rich depths of the oceans. There, the king of the seven seas will take you by the hand and show you a jolly good time for 2 hours and change. Thank you, James Wan, for delivering my Aquaman again. Farewell, DCEU. You've been a worthy friend in the darkest of times. But now a new adventure awaits, one led by the glorious red and blue of a new Superman, the shadows of a new Batman, and the glowing green of a new Lantern. Over to you, James Gunn. Make us believe a man can fly. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom begins promisingly enough. The DC and Warner Brothers logos are given a crusty underwater makeover that to get you in the right mood. As a group of mercenaries prepares to do their dirty work, Arthur Curry, Daka Aquaman, Jason Momoa stares them down. His gaze grows steely, as kicking is certainly in store. Only the scene cuts to Arthur smashing two action figures together as he relays the story to his newborn son, Arthur Jr. The two scenes are then cross cut together haphazardly. The obnoxious needle drop of Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild grates the ears. They've ripped the script and later it was rewritten. Everything funny about him telling this to his son and everything cool about him fighting evildoers is flattened into an unrecognizable pile of sludge. This is the experience of watching Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Released in 2018, the first Aquaman became the highest grossing film based on a DC character. Although it maintains a divided reputation among filmgoers, I appreciated the commitment of director James Wan. Insidious saw to making something that off the wall. It truly resembled a comic book. Times have very much changed since its release. After the debacle that was the rollout of The Flash and underperformance of Blue Beetle, not to mention the upcoming new DC films regime led by James Gunn. The DC Extended Universe is ending on a Hail Mary with one of its more popular characters. Almost none of that remains in James Wan's just plain sad follow up. Warning: spoilers for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom below. The good of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom below before the bad and the ugly. It's no fun to trash a film that so many talented people worked on. So let's start with the positive. As always, James Wan brings to life an utter visual masterpiece. Through the wide eyed cinematography of Don Burgess and tremendous visual effects work, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is undeniable eye candy. Every frame is so dense, it's like an eye spy of incredible caricature design and rich aquatic texture. With the sound off, this thing would nearly play like gangbusters. Although the action sequences take a noticeable dip in quality, there are still enough frenetic showdowns to get the blood pumping. A third act fight sequence between Arthur and Black Manta almost rivals us that of him and Orm, Patrick Wilson from the first film. The cast here is mostly all game too. Momoa continues to have brotastic charisma out the wazoo. Supporting players such as Amber Heard as Mira, Tamira Morrison as Arthur Curry's dad, beefed up roles for a cheeky Patrick Wilson and a Goldblum level neurotic Randall Park as Dr. Stephen Shin. Seem to be having a good time. No doubt about this, though. The MVP is Yahya Abdul Matin too as David Kane Black Manta. He runs away with the movie. His mix of Shakespearean intensity and go for broke mustache twirling Saturday morning cartoon villainy really lets him cut loose. It's not hard to see why James Wan wanted to center the now cancelled The Trencher spin off around him. About the story for the King of Atlantis this time around. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom story is practically nonsensical, but I'll try my best to explain it. Arthur Curry attempts to juggle being a father to the newborn Arthur Jr. and King of Atlantis at the same time. Meanwhile, Black Manta acquires a mythical artifact known as the Black Trident to help get his revenge on Aquaman for killing his father. 5 month time jump. Manta's activities have apparently exacerbated global warming by mining an Atlantean resource known as Oraclecum. Dr. Stephen Shin is involved in helping Manta for reasons that are decidedly vague. Also, the trident is connecting Black Manta to an ancient evil. Also, there's something about a pirate king in there. Oh, yeah, and Aquaman, for convoluted reasons, has to team up with his exiled brother, to save the world. Screenwriter David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick has certainly written a few movies I've liked in the past. Here's looking at you, Orphan, and the first Aquaman. Who knows if it's the script's fault or the unacceptable edit, but there are far too many plot lines going on, and almost none of them get focus. Just as one plotline begins, another takes over. None of them, save for the precious few bits of introspection for Black Manta we get, have the chance to be interesting. Everything is so big, there are so many moving parts that it all feels so small and inconsequential. It's even sadder because Ramzan Sizinus played James Vanessly in the original is totally gone, replaced instead by an attempt at snarky self awareness so unfunny. I counted one unintentional laugh out of the non stop barrage of jokes. It's just sad. Final thoughts on Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, thankfully, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's obvious who the blame for this film falls on: Warner Brothers. The notoriously hands on with the DCEU studio has their fingerprints all over this thing. Reshoots are incredibly noticeable. The tone changes many times within scenes. It has no your idea whether it wants to be an action film, a comedy, a bromance, or a particularly charged screed against the way we treat our notions. Therefore, it's neither and all of them at once. Etta Kirk Mori can't have had an easy time. The film was allegedly test screened over and over again with various iterations of Batman included at some point, only for the film to have no trace of them. The result is an everything but the kitchen sink approach that's impossible to follow. Worse, it's deeply insecure of its own existence. A big symbol of what went wrong here is the use of Amber Heard. Hamera is the co lead of the previous Aquaman and a fan favorite. Due to our guided Waditi named the titled Waditi Mi Walper developed Zichian Sazwai and later Titan and that the tar media frenzy story due to writer surrounding me the frenzy surrounding the trial and abuse allegation script and against that it was rewritten. J, what is probation salary? What is the tat and asked it ex-husband the abuse allegation J? What is the probation salary? The abuse sari world the bedi the sardine warden is to the tat deep are what the sardin warden dano sarati taragudi what the site to and it tender judge manager 1000. Okay, I know. She hung up the phone, her voice cold and devoid of warmth. Did you hear that? Assistant Q, is there anything else? I took off my employee badge, which we will not be commenting on. They have essentially reduced her role to a barely present cameo. She barely speaks at all, despite being the mother to Arthur Jr., especially considering the severe harassment she faces online. The scripts were the sedative. Upsetting that it's pretty upsetting that this call would be made, and it's a glaring elephant in the room that seems to have been done to appease some audiences. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is a movie so desperate to be liked that it appealed to no one. It's a tornado of mismanagement, tonal shifts, a story that doesn't make a lick of sense, and a complete lack of identity that it will go down as one of the biggest disasters in recent superhero film history. Fans who want to pay their respects to the end of the DCEU might find some fun performances and neat visuals to take solace in, but hopefully the cast and crew are off to greener pastures. James Wan's DCEU capper ends on a sour note that echoes all throughout the seven seas.